To our national broadcast, Tiffany Norwood. She's back, founder and CEO of Tribetan and a co-founder of SimWin Sports. Tiffany, welcome back. You know, Tiffany, Doge use of AI with its data raised some important implications, especially when you input federal data to AI. What are the implications?
Yes, well, good morning, Armstrong. I'm excited to be here, and I'm more here in my personal capacity as a business leader and being based in Washington, D.C., and I'm also a grad student, right, an engineering grad student at the moment, getting deeper and deeper into this tech, even though my background is already tech. There's a lot of tremendous implications with regards to the government data being leveraged by people, unelected, officials that don't have to adhere to the same laws or ethical standards that you typically would get from federal workers. For me, it's a personal concern because I'm based in DC, and you might not realize this, but as a producer of a show that debuted at the Kennedy Center, I got caught up in the whole Kennedy Center experience last week because of the Doge coming in and leveraging data and making decisions solely based on data, because I have a show called Sexy Black Genius that had black in the title, but had nothing whatsoever to do with some of the issues that they're focused on regarding DEI, which I have separate views on. We won't get into that. With all large language models, which are the models that are used to drive AI, they have to be trained, and they have to basically siphon off the intelligence of many, many, many human beings. The human being is in every part of this process, hence why all the people and all the organizations developing these large language models are constantly trying to grab what we call data, but it's basically, human intelligence and human experience and human creativity, because AI is not as impressive on its own. So humans are involved as far as handing off human intelligence. Humans are involved as far as determining what's important to the model, and humans are involved in keeping the model updated and relevant and constantly trained going forward. The concept of general intelligence is further out in the future than I think is implied, although the general public will perceive that there's general intelligence because it's talked about that way. AI is talked about as if it's the separate and distinct third-party entity. And part of the reason why it's talked about that way and positioned that way is because then what or who is accountable if things go wrong?
Let me stop you there, because I want to make sure that audience realizes what we're discussing now is not why you were invited on the show. I've gone totally off script, as I normally do, but I had to ask you this. Could you sort of help our audience understand? I remember when we first had the budget, the latter part of last year, and Elon Musk convinced Trump to reject it because he was able to take that budget, put it into an algorithm, and know exactly what was there within 7 minutes. How does that play when you're trying to find waste, fraud, and abuse in government when you use that same algorithm to figure out where the waste and the fraud abuse is? Because it's not perfect.
No, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. AI is not perfect
Right.
because the humans guiding the AI and training and developing it are not perfect, right? So, one of the things when I was in Vital, I was like, oh, what are the trends in business around AI? That was what I thought I was coming on to talk about. But your question around waste is similar, right? So business and industry is using AI to discover where waste is and make corrections, et cetera. But it's one part of the puzzle, as in businesses and leaders don't let AI make recommendations around waste and cuttings and just do it. It's one of many inputs to a leader or CEO, just like their COO or their head of sales or their, their general counsel or chief operations officer would also be inputs. So the first thing is, using AI to find waste in general is a valid use of AI and a great use of AI as a input to a more robust portfolio of inputs that then whoever is the leader makes a decision off of. The data in business is
hold that point on the data in business.
The data in government.
Wait, Tiffany, hold that point. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come right back. The data in business. I want to pick up on that. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Okay.
And welcome back. So, the data in business. Tiffany Norwood, please continue.
Sure. And also, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. I feel like I'm on a roll with some sort of soliloquy here. But, you look at the data in business, and the data that's being used in those models for, say, waste or cost cutting in business is the business's data, right? So when you look at government, and how they're grabbing this data or training off of it, who fully owns that data and who has control over it? And to what extent, if it's general public's data or private company or enterprise's data, is there like a flag or a tag or a demarcation? We don't have insight or understanding into this. So that's the first part. Like, is our own data being weaponized against us? Without any consideration as to I or whoever or an organization never gave you permission to have access to that data. The second part is what's going into the algorithms, right? I'm a coder more when I was younger, but I'm getting back into it because of grad school. And just like anything, right, whether it's a business plan or a strategy or a spreadsheet, there's all these assumptions that go into deciding whether or not you write a story one way or another way, whether or not you develop a financial model one way or another way. And the same is with regards to these algorithms and large language models. So it's basically automating what the human being or the group of human beings think is waste.
Let me stop you there. What you're really saying is what AI supposedly does is go in and identify the staff that should be cut, where the waste is, and then once that is done, AI goes in and take over that role. But what you're also saying is that AI cannot, in the long run, manage getting rid of the government waste, especially when you're trying to trim $2 trillion from these federal agencies.
Somewhat. So I'm not fully saying, what I'm saying is, let's even take a step back, right? So the AI is a tool and an agent of the human beings controlling the AI. So as far as what the AI defines as waste and how, and therefore going out to snoop and look for that waste is determined by the human being.
Okay.
So whereas one human being can think the National Park Service and all the people and a huge number of people that support the National Park Service is waste because they never go to the Grand Canyon or Yosemite Park or wherever, and so they don't value it. Another human being or group of human beings could have a priority on the national parks and say it's important to preserve them, to keep them open, to have the general public be accessible to it. Depending on which human beings are programming that algorithm will depend on what the AI spits out as far as you should fire these people and you should close this.
But are you implying that there could be an inherent bias?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a bias to coding. Just like when I've predominantly been a tech entrepreneur and a techie. And back in the day where I was building up teams and they were teams of men to help deploy these, complex tech systems, how I managed them and when I was looking into the code or the algorithm is very different than my male counterparts and how they would manage looking at the algorithm and saying, oh, that's good, that's bad, I don't like that assumption, et cetera. That is all, it's all in there all along the process. You cannot ever decouple the tech and AI from the human beings building and controlling and managing.
So let me pivot here. What breakthroughs in AI do you predict will have the most significant impact in the next decade?
Oh, there's so many of them. Do I have to stay in the business realm or can I just drop a general one?
Your decision.
Okay, I'm going to drop a general one because I don't see a lot of people talking about this as much, but I definitely think it's a very compelling trend that started over in my industry. Maybe the first time I saw something really interesting in it was 4 years ago, which is personal AI. And what I mean by personal AI is, right now when we look at large language models, we think about ChatGPT and how we hear about, all the intellectual property issues with all this data that they try to train the model off of. With personal AI, it's typically a large language model around a single human being. So you may say, why is that interesting to you and what could be possibly compelling about it? I'll give you some weird examples that might, disturb you a bit, but I'll also give you some, application in business and even a spiritual example I saw that I thought, this is very disruptive. I'm not going to pass judgment on it yet. So a couple of use cases. The first one in the personal space. A couple of years ago, I was at a salon where a filmmaker is going to have a movie come out about how a large language model was made off of their friend who was dying of cancer, who wanted to continue to exist after they died because I want to say they were in their early 30s, like very young. And it was, a tragic story. And they asked if they could work with them and also document it to build a whole large language model around them as an individual.
Around them dying?
No, around who they were as a person while they're living.
Hold that point.
All the prompts, all the human training that you hear about with regular large language models, it's a singular person training that model so that when that person passed away, their family members and friends could still engage with them.
Hold that point. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Mm-hmm.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. I'm so amped up in this conversation with Tiffany that let me just calm myself down. Tiffany, please continue with your other examples. My apologies.
Okay, no worries. I think if I give a few different use cases, you'll also understand a bit of the technology more. So that was one use case. So for example, we could have an Armstrong AI, right? But in that particular use case with that person, think about a scenario if they had kids and the kids were young, and when the kids got older, wanted to find out how their parent what advice their parent would give them, even if their parent had been passed away, say 10 years before. So all of us could see, I immediately think of my dad, my brother, like so many, my grandparents, that would be really compelling, but obviously there are ethical issues. A use case in business is for a while, there have been a couple of companies doing this with top tier therapists. So training AI on leveraging by a particular therapist that has really great patient outcomes. And then once they develop that model, people can have access to that therapist in a cost-effective way 24/7. So they have patients who can afford to be in person with them and pay that hourly rate or whatever, but then also they're helping other people, or maybe it's a rapid response type thing where it's overnight, even with an existing patient. They're able to give guidance and perspective 24/7 via AI that's replicated them.
This is shocking, because you can already add your own experience and knowledge to these examples that you're giving, especially when you think of the ethical and moral implications. How is AI transforming the workplace, particularly in the media and tech industries where you are, and what jobs do you, Tiffany, see AI creating versus those it might displace?
Yeah, so if we look at it from the creative perspective versus the destructive perspective, it's very exciting. I'll say as an entrepreneur, I've done 9 startups, and usually I have challenges in the beginning of a startup with, resources, people, funding, etc. One positive thing with AI that I've been doing for the past few years is that I'll create an AI org chart, because normally those roles are played by me. Like any founder or anyone doing a startup, this, Armstrong, right? You're wearing so many different hats and so many different roles, in the beginning. Instead, I might have Amy, the accountant, and Marcus, who does marketing, and Sam, who does sales, and Trisha, who does tech. And it's just names that I'm giving to the AI as I engage with them. Because a lot of times when you're doing work with people, say office work, it's a series of, interactions and conversations.
But how do workers best prepare for this AI-driven job market, Tiffany?
Well, to prepare, one of the positive things about this era, unlike, say, 40 years ago, is there's so many tools and so many resources online for free. So to prepare, one of the first steps is just to play with it. Play with one of my favorite AIs that's very accessible that I have people start on is Meta's AI that's a part of WhatsApp. So if you're on WhatsApp, a lot of people haven't noticed it, but you can type in that top box, Meta, and you'll see that there's a Meta AI agent or whatever you would want to call it as part of your chat, and you can just talk to it. And when you talk to it, you can experiment, and I find it's very intuitive, and if you're sort of more tech curious and tech adjacent, it's a great way to start.
I have to tell you.
I'll give you one practice.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm going to come back with some final thoughts, but I got to tell you, I've never tried AI in anything that I've done in my writing, my columns, in my business. I'm intimidated by it, but I must tell you, I am. But we're going to come back with some final thoughts with Tiffany Norwood. Is this not fascinating? Don't go away. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Are we adequately prepared, Tiffany, for the social applications widespread of AI? Are we?
No, not fully. And the reason why is that I want more of my fellow citizens to have a general understanding of AI so that more of us can weigh in on the direction of how we're going to use it. So when we were ending, you were saying that you're pretty intimidated by AI. That's a lot of people, right? And so I encourage, again, to just do something with it, like say for your next vacation, go into the AI and say, you are one of the best travel agents in the world, plan a 5-day holiday for me near the beach.
Interesting.
And only with a budget of $700.
Oh.
And just see what comes out, something that's meaningful to you. But I do feel we're not adequately prepared because there's so many people avoiding it. And so there's a small number of us that are then, shoving it into society in the way that they want AI to go into society. And I, even as a techie, am concerned about that.
What about the global standards for AI and development, use, and how feasible is this? We have about 40 seconds.
So, there's a whole spectrum of standards. The U.S. is one of the loosest, and Europe is one of the most stringent. And I think it's a good thing that we have a spectrum with regards to the standards so that we can observe as a global community which way is working the best. I'll also note that Kathy Vidal, who was the former head of the USPTO, worked with the previous administration to give guidance on co-inventing with AI. The United States was completely ahead of the curve with that. So I'm excited to see, with all these different scenarios around the world, which one ends up.
I got to tell you something. There's never enough time with you. We're out of time. We needed to do this for an hour on the broader show. Thank you, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tiffany Norwood.
Thank you, Armstrong.
Thank you. Good day, everybody.